Welcome to another season of In the Zone videos, the educational video series where we take a previous hunt and the video from that hunt and break it down to illustrate and really show the tactics and the situation that we were in to get us close enough to get a shot. Before we jump in though, I want to take a minute and thank the sponsor for this series, Exo Mountain Gear. I started wearing Exo packs several years ago when they first came out, and they're still the most comfortable and purpose-designed hunting pack I've ever used. They weigh about 4 pounds empty, and they compress down small enough that I can wear it as a fast and light day pack, but then also have the ability to carry far more weight than anyone needs to pack on their back and do it comfortably. By spanning every need that I have in a hunting pack, day hunting, bivvy hunting, and then packing heavy loads of elk meat back to the truck, all with one pack, they're truly the best pack that I've found for my style of hunting. Thanks for joining us in another episode of In the Zone. In this episode, we're going to revisit a really slow day of elk hunting here in Idaho, a day that turned into some quick action and sore backs in a matter of minutes. It was day one of our Idaho archery elk hunt in 2021, and day one Donnie was up as the shooter. We had scouted the area prior to the season, but when we came back a few weeks later for the hunt, it seemed like all the elk that we'd found while we were scouting had just mysteriously up and disappeared. We hiked from camp that first morning and checked several trail cams that we'd set up in August. The cameras were showing a lot of elk action, including some really nice bulls, right up until the end of the first week of September. But we were there hunting during the third week of September, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't buy a single bugle in any of those areas. And that only meant one thing. We're going on a death march. And did we ever? We hiked all morning and right through the middle of the day, and covered several draws and drainages over the course of several miles. Finally, at around 4 o'clock p.m., we hiked through a saddle and down onto an open ridge that was adjacent to a big north-facing hillside that was covered in timber, and it overlooked the entire drainage down below us. The afternoon wind was really howling, and in between wind gusts, I was doing my best to throw a bugle out, hoping we might be able to get and hear a response from somewhere, anywhere. I let out a location bugle, and just as it ended, the wind picked up again, but we thought we might have heard something. It didn't really sound like a bugle, and we couldn't even tell where the sound had come from, but it was the only thing we'd heard all day, so we decided to hike back up to the saddle and sit there at the edge of the timber just in case. We made it back up to the edge of the timber on the east side of the saddle, and Donnie and cameraman John moved in to set up just inside the trees while I stayed back on the edge of the opening to call. The wind had died down considerably up where we were now, and as we were moving in, I gave another location bugle. And after 10 or 15 seconds, my bugle was answered back by a weak, bedded sounding bugle from 150 or 200 yards away in the timber. It was game on. The bull sounded like it was bedded just slightly below us in the timber, so I moved up the ridge along the timber line to get up above Donnie and John, hoping that I'd be able to pull the bull up into their setup. The wind was all over the place out there on the edge of the timber where I was, but it was fairly steady and angling slightly down the hill just inside the shaded canopy of the timber. We'd be okay in this setup as long as the bull didn't drop down below us. Just inside the tree line, Donnie and John were finding that there were very few shooting lanes, and the hillside was covered with multiple blowdowns that made it really difficult to move around for both them and the elk. The next thing I knew, the bull was walking out in front of me on the open hillside and started circling up into the saddle we'd just hiked up through. I'm still not sure how that bull didn't wind us as he dropped down below us on the hillside, but with all the swirling and gusting winds, I think we just got lucky.
Let's just listen for a second. Donnie, he's coming out low. He's coming down here. That was him that just bugled.
At this point, I was pinned down out on the open hillside and had very little cover to conceal myself. There was no way I was going to be able to get up and move into the trees and get behind Donnie to try to pull the bull back across to him. The only thing I could do was muffle some cow calls and point him towards the trees, hoping it'd be enough to lure that bull back as Donnie and John slowly and quietly started working their way back out towards the edge of the opening. Despite my best attempts to try to cast the cow calls back behind me and toward the timber, the bull was locked on my location. I was standing there frozen on the open hillside, completely unable to even move. Every time the bull started to look away or started to walk, I'd cow call, just trying to buy time for Donnie and John to get into position to get a shot. The bull knew right where the calls were coming from, and being out in the open, he turned and started walking in my direction, but he knew he should have been able to see an elk there, and he couldn't. He started getting pretty cautious and started to really start sniffing the thermals more intently, and then slowly turned to start walking back down the open hillside where he had come from. It was now or never for Donnie. Looking back on that setup, if I had it to do over again, I would have definitely stayed in the trees with Donnie and John. Setting up out in the wide open, even though we knew the elk was in the timber, was probably not the smartest choice of a place to set up. It was perfect when the bull was in the timber across from us, but as soon as the bull circled below us and popped out in the open, I was pinned down and really pretty much ineffective as a caller. We got really lucky, and fortunately Donnie knew where he needed to get to, and he got there just in time to get a shot. If there's a lesson to be learned here, it's to make sure that the caller is set up and concealed as well as the shooter, especially if the bull decides not to follow the script, or in the case that a bull shows up unexpected from a different direction.